Okay, really, we're going to finish the 14th chapter of Oversea Under Stone by Susan Cooper. I know it feels like it's been going on forever. Great Uncle Mary showed up. Barney threw him the grail. He caught it. Barney tried to throw him the case with a parchment in it. It split. It fell. Hastings jumped in the water to catch it. The Penhallows are getting back on the yacht. Bill's terrified. Bill stood as immobile as the children, gazing open-mouthed at the sea turning golden now under the late sun. Then Withers shouted at him, lurching toward the outboard motor and the remaining dinghy. As the boat moved off, the boy flung himself aboard. The children still stood watching. No one moved either aboard the speedboat as it swayed toward the rocks on the swell. The dinghy moved out, buzzing like an angry wasp, and then beside it they saw a dark head break the surface and heard the rasp of desperate gulping breaths. The dinghy slowed, and the man and the boy in it heaved the tall black figure aboard. It held nothing in its hand. Mr. Hastings lay in the bottom of the boat, choking and gasping for breath. But as they watched, he raised his head, and dark, wet hair flattened over his forehead like a mask, and put out a hand to Withers to pull himself up. With rage and hatred twisting in his face, he looked back at Great Uncle Mary. Great Uncle Mary stood in the speedboat, with one hand on the windshield, and the other holding the grail, the sun behind him blazing in his white hair. He drew himself so tall and erect that he looked for a strange moment like some great creature of the rocks and the sea, and he called across the water in a strange voice that rang back from the cliffs, some words in a language that the children could not understand, but with a note through it that made them suddenly shiver. And the figure in the other boat seemed to shrink within himself at the sound, so that the menace and power were all at once gone out of him. Suddenly he looked only ridiculous in the skin-wet black clothes, and seemed smaller than he had been before. All three in the boat cowered down, making no move or sound as the dinghy crossed back to the yacht. The children stirred. "Gosh," Barney whispered. "What did he say?" "I don't know." "I'm glad I don't know," Jane said slowly. They watched as the three figures swung themselves aboard the yacht, and almost at once the engine throbbed higher, and the Lady Mary's long white hull slipped away. The broad outboard dinghy trailed forlorn behind, but the other remained, bobbing and drifting, empty on the waves. The yacht headed out across the bay, past Trewissex harbor, and down the coast, until she was only a small white shape on the sun-gilded sea. And by the time they had all climbed aboard the speedboat and looked again, she was gone. And that's the end of chapter 14.